Competencies and skills, and which ones that I feel are most important. Well, I would say that number one, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I think it's really a matter of perspective and how you approach how you work and your career and what you feel is important. But when I talk to individuals on that topic, when they ask me, I usually ask them first. I say, what do you think is the most important competencies and skills? And I get lots of different answers. And it's interesting because a lot of people will merge content with a competency and skill. And this is what I mean. Sometimes I'll get an answer like, well, I know these coding languages. I have this kind of technical skill in this area. And I say, okay, that's fair. I mean, again, there's no right or wrong answers. But a lot of times content sets a very finite direction. And again, let's look at a coding language. Well, if you code in a certain language, well, that is one language. And is it directly transferable to another business line? Sometimes it can be, but it's really the competency of coding generally is what transfers. So when I think about it, number one, I try to separate out content. And the things that I believe are important, at least for me, are things that can move across any business line. And there's something that will help me be successful no matter what the content is that I'm working on. And the case in point for that for me personally is just the way I've moved my career from military to government job to tech industry with different jobs in the tech industry. And I think about a competency and I go all the way back, and there's two that I've worked on since the early days in my career, just starting out. And those are really interpersonal awareness and the ability to negotiate. And now let me talk a bit about why, at least for me, when I think about competencies, those were the two that I think come to the top. And some of the ideas that we talk about in terms of competencies like communication and collaboration, those are in there as well. But the lens I use goes like this. So when you deal with the world and our coworkers and cross groups, it's really about a relationship and an agenda, right? So the relationship piece is, do my partners and I understand each other? Meaning, are we talking apples to apples? Not always as easy as you think, because, and we can go into Myers-Briggs and how people assimilate data. But when I talk about interpersonal awareness, the definition that I use for myself is, can I understand what drives the other person and what their agenda is? How do they make decisions? Because to me, that's the first part of working together, is understanding my partner and what do they need and how do they absorb data. Here's just a high level example. There's lots of different sets out there, but there was one thing going around for a while where they talk about people's personalities are red, yellow, green, or blue. And red is basically your be brief, be bright, and be gone. Like, just give me the basic details. That's all they need to make decisions. You have blue, which are data-oriented people. They want to know, if I make that change to that feature, how many milliseconds is that going to add? Okay, they're really into the data and the spreadsheets and the testing data. Then you have the yellow, which was well, how does this impact my team? Like, you want asking me to do work, like, or this change, how is it going to impact my team? And then you have green, which is all about the customer. Well, what's going to be the overall customer experience? Well, that 4 milliseconds, is that going to change their actual experience? And so that's what I call interpersonal awareness, understanding how you work with, and this will go for every individual and team, might be different, is how do they want and need the data so you can have a really level set conversation then on the goal, which you know how to negotiate. So understanding what's important to them and how they make decisions, how they assimilate data, which is interpersonal awareness to me, is critical to work with somebody else who you're usually trying to get something from or align an agenda with, which is the negotiation piece. Because if you think about the challenges that you might have had at times when you're asking a team to do work and they say, like, I'm too busy. And I was like, well, what are they doing that maybe you can help with? Remember, this is a relationship where you're asking for something, can you provide something in return? Or if they don't like the answer, can they understand it? Because you're speaking to them in terms that resonate with them, whether it's one of those 4 different ways to present data, or just spending the time to understand what will change their mind, like what kind of data do they need in order to be able to negotiate an outcome. So for me, I've always focused on any group I go into or project I need to work on is, what do my partners need and what's their pain points now? Because in a lot of cases, you're asking them to reprioritize something they're already doing. Everybody's got a lot of work to do. And so if you come up with a new ask, or you need to work on a new project together, and it may not be top of their priority. So understanding what's in their priority and how do they actually, what kind of data do they need to make a change in their priority based on impact is critical to me. And that's one of the competencies I've always kind of looked to for myself is, okay, what is it that my partner that is going on with them that they need help with, or how do they think about changing their priorities, or how do they actually prioritize all their different work, because I'm making an ask of them to change that most likely. And likewise, then the art of negotiation is, can we come up with an agreeable solution if we're understanding each other about what's right for the business? And a lot of times you're not going to get exactly what you want on the time frame, and they're not going to be able to give you exactly what you want, because they have other issues to deal with. But the important piece there for me is that I believe it's an art as much as a science to try to figure out what's going to motivate that team to make a change or to help you out. And I think that when you look at how you can apply that to any type of business line or discipline that you're working in, it's critical, because especially in the tech companies, we're all highly matrixed, we're all very dependent on each other, and we all have probably different agendas in our own organization for what's important. So being able to really level set the discussion to a baseline, apples to apples or oranges to oranges, in order to really then come to a good overall business decision for the larger business is critical. Now, it's not always easy, to be clear. It's sometimes it takes a while to go figure out exactly what that is. And I always caution that you're not going to probably hit it the first time. But over time, you get to know certain teams and what's important to them. And the more you work with them, you get a sense of like, what are their drivers? Like, do they really have a manager who does not agree in that direction at all? And therefore, you have to go another level up to go figure out how are you going to influence their manager, even if your partners at your level are agreeing with you. It goes up to the decision maker, whoever that is, especially if resources are involved. So I would say that for me, interpersonal awareness and the ability to negotiate have been the 2 most important competencies for me that have allowed me then to really move businesses forward. Because getting, obviously, as you get more senior or you take on more scope, more of your work is cross-group, and almost none of it is directly within your vertical, which means at some point, you're always going to have to negotiate some kind of a deal, if you want to call it that, with your partners to help them out. And the one thing that I know I always try to do in organizations, and if you want to take it to the next level, is find those key decision makers in orgs that you're going to be working with more than once. And they're usually pretty set relationships. There are certain teams that always have to work together. And the one thing I always do is try to give them something for free early on, right? Like, if you think about it from their perspective, I've got this new person who's coming to me asking me for work, and I have no idea like how I'm going to get this done. And they're just asking me for something. Sometimes I'll spend a little bit of my time capital to help them out with something for nothing, right? Building the relationships, building trust. And I guarantee you, I've never been in a situation where I haven't helped somebody out selflessly, where they didn't return the favor at some point. Because again, it's a relationship and a partnership, and that negotiation over time is that you're not always going to get what you want, but in the long term, you both get what you need. So that's just a little bit about what I think that for me, when I get asked the 2 top competencies that I've always worked on improving, because they've tended to help me move decisions and business goals forward across multiple groups. Love to hear what you believe your top competencies that you favor are, and I'm sure others would benefit as well down in the comments. Thank you.